Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Knowledge Panel episode 6. And this is what is your migration checklist? And once again, I've got a fantastic group of people with us. And so I've got Debdu, David, and Miracle and Chris. So hi, guys. Can you all introduce yourself? David, Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi. Cheers, Dixon. I'm Chris Green. I'm Head of Marketing Innovation at Footprint Digital. I'm an SEO of 12, 13 years, there or thereabouts. Migrate a few websites in my time. It's a subject I quite like. I still have hair as well, which is quite a good combo because it's kind of a stressful experience. It's not a wig.
I like it. So I don't like migrations. So I'm here and going to take my feedback from you. I seem to mess up every single one as I possibly can. So,
I'm not saying that all of mine are successful, but the vast majority are.
Excellent. Deb, do you want to say hi? And who are you? Who are you working for?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Debdut Kumar Mandal. So I'm head of technical at Performance.io. So I've been working in the industry over 15 years. So I basically look after a small team. So doing basically site audit, migration, landing page optimization, CRO, conversion rate optimization. Also, I have done a few PPC campaign. So mainly like a lead gen aspects. Also, I've been working on international SEO and strategy. Yes, that is pretty much me.
Okay, I promise you we won't be talking about PPC today. We're somewhat off that subject. Miracle, and welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself and where are you coming from?
So I'm so glad to be here because I'm the youngest person here.
We like a broad church. I'm definitely the oldest. I'm guessing.
I was working to place it in a plan. I've been working in the industry for 10 years, and everyone's like young, so it's good to be.
Oh well, it's good to see an old person. Thank you very much. The compliment is great.
I'm Miracle.
Who are you working with?
Head of SEO at Erudite, and I've been in the industry for 10 years, and I've always been agency side, so done so many migrations across so many different industries. So yeah.
Excellent, guys. Thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate your time. It's gonna take about 45 minutes for anybody that's in the audience. If you're in the audience, it's getting live streamed on all sorts of different places. So Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and who knows, we may have some others as well. This is all being sponsored by Inlinks, which is my company. So I won't say too much about Inlinks, but obviously, if you want to try Inlinks, obviously please go and try inlinks.net, and it's a really cool SEO tool. But we're going to just jump right in. But before we do, I just want to introduce David, my producer, and make sure I haven't missed any important bits and pieces for the for Q&As. And how do they do that sort of thing, David?
No, not at all. Yeah, if you're watching live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, then please, any questions that you ask or any comments that you make, we'll try to incorporate as part of the discussion. And of course, this is also available as a podcast. So this episode will be produced and available as an audio podcast the next day or so. We are available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, a few other places as well. But of course, catch the next episode live as well. And we'll tell you when that is at the end of the show.
And if you ever need to find us, you can find us at theknowledgepanel.com, and that bounces to wherever we think the coolest place for you to be is at any particular time. So not to scare you by being on Spotify, YouTube, and everything, but I want to dive in then, guys, and say, right, okay, migration checklist. Just in case people can't go for the whole 45 minutes and they just want to grab their first thing, what I want to start with, and I'll go with you last, Deb, because I didn't pre-warn you of this one. What's the one thing, the one common mistake that people are making, or the one thing that you want somebody to take away to not mess up when they're going through a migration? So, Chris, do you want to go first?
Oh, so the one thing, I think the root of all problems in a migration is not setting expectations, not managing the stakeholders right at the start. And that's not a technical thing, that's a people thing. But the fundamental problem is people march into a migration. We'll come and talk about migrations come in different shapes and sizes and different complexities. But But if you haven't had a chance to size the problem and actually work out, well, where do we need to be worried? What are we going to lose? What are we going to gain? What's in stake? And you haven't then notified everyone, you can't plan, you can't change, you can't budget or scope. So I think actually my biggest migration checklist is not a technical SEO one at all. It's probably more of a project management one. Just work out what the hell it is you're actually doing, and then make sure everyone agrees that the vision of what good is the same across the board. And if someone can work out how to do that well, let me know. Quite a challenge.
Excellent. Okay, Miracle, do you want to go for one?
Yeah, I'll go. I think, just as Chris has said, it's just managing expectations. But I'll put it in this way. People don't realize that whenever you migrate a site, you're forcing Google to reevaluate that site. And so they just think, well, there'll be a slight wobble after the migration. And if you do your redirects right. However, if you're changing the content, if you're scaling down or scaling up, Google is going to reevaluate the authority. And so lots of things can change. And a lot of people don't think about that and don't put that into consideration.
Okay, and of course, then they blame the SEO at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah, absolutely. It's clearly the SEO fault. Yeah, okay. What do you want to go for?
So yes, from my perspective, so I would say, as Chris said, like expectation, and depends on like what is your migration look like. Is it you are going to change the domain? Is it you are going to change your the content? Is it going to change the UX? So for my experience, so when we are doing the migration for new domain, so we had a really bad experience, and a stakeholder wasn't sure about that. And it came to a kind of like a performance aspect. So yes, we made a new domain. So what would be the performance look like? Will we get all the existing value to the new domain? Will we get all the conversion is coming through to a new domain? So that is kind of the experience I had. So I think it's more about the stakeholder expectation, and also the fundamental consideration and facts need to be considered before putting into the migration phase.
So do you think there's a very common thing then, guys, that people start by saying, oh, let's just do this, and they think that it's a small problem, and then it turns out to be a massive problem for other people in the organization? Is that you're saying that's a really common problem, all of you, it seems?
I think the biggest problem is it just comes in too late. So, we're launching in a week. Someone goes, are we going to do better in Google after this? Is the casual question. It's, if you're unlucky, you don't have an SEO stakeholder in the room. I like Miracle agency side for the vast majority of my career. I'm usually the one that gets the 11th hour phone call saying, we're going to do this next week. Is it a good idea? The answer is almost always no. But there are versions of we can help get it right. But I don't know. I mean, I don't see many migrations that I'm there literally at project inception. They're always the most successful.
So So there's all sorts of different migration can start in different forms, and I think to at least a couple of you mentioned it. That it can be changing a domain, it can be changing CMS, changing URL structure. We're back at Inlinks. We're about to change our email servers from IMAP to Exchange. I won't go too much into that today, except I'll take any tips that you guys have got, if you've got any on that one, which is, hopefully not going to mess up the website. But let's take a common one then. And I'm going to start with this one because I think it's probably the easiest type of migration, but also the most common one. Now we've got mobile, because mobile's like everybody needs an AMP site or not need an AMP site. I don't know. We can discuss it. But more common than that is HTTP and HTTPS. So I think it's pretty well agreed that for every SEO that if your website is HTTPS now, it's going to be a significant improvement on HTTP. So everybody has that if they haven't done it already. Is that easy? Does that ever go wrong? Or is that just literally one line of code in your htaccess until you realize you're on a Windows server and you need something else? Anyone want to jump in?
Go on then. I mean, how do I answer this without saying it depends? I mean, you kind of
that's my pet hate, by the way. But I get that you guys have to. But I'm going to have to say I hate.
Well, I mean, you've touched upon it in the answer, in that it's one line of the htaccess unless you're a Windows server, or unless it's Nginx, or the content management system. I think. Let me phrase it another way. For the vast majority of content management systems that haven't been butchered, the change should be relatively straightforward. However, it's never as simple as a 1-line or 2-line code change. Because if you really want to clear up any kind of baggage, any non-standard, non-secure URLs, you've got to do a little bit of digging and unearthing. And I think, scraping the website, finding the location of the links, having someone that's willing to go through the database for you and do the similar, those kind of points always take the time. But fundamentally should be quick and easy. I haven't seen many people out there who have a genuine reason not to. But most of the time it's cantankerous old CMSs or servers that they just can't or won't touch. And they have a far bigger problem than not being on HTTPS by that point.
Yeah. I found that I was surprised to see, we had the other day, I managed to crash my blog on the Inlinks WordPress blog. I managed to crash the whole site. So sorry to my business partners and stuff. And in the end, I had to get rid of a bunch of plugins. That seemed to be the thing that was causing. Inlinks isn't WordPress driven, but the blog is, and getting rid of some plugins. And so I, in the process, then wrecked whatever I'd got for generating HTTPS by default. And I was surprised that there wasn't a button in Yoast that just press that button and every page will be HTTPS, because I could find another plugin that I could put down. But in the end, I went back and just we did it in htaccess. I mean, I guess you'd all agree that if you can do it in htaccess, that would be the thing to do, or is that not something that you'd like to go for? Miracle, Deb, do you want to throw anything there?
I think for us, because as an agency, we're not looking, we always have to go through dev. And so we're not like directly, have access to the CMS. So we'll usually advise them to go through the htaccess file, because it's really difficult though, because they want you to provide them, like when the dev has done something and they feel they've done their job, they want you to provide them the whole walkthrough. If you come to them and say, well, this has gone wrong and we feel you should do it this way, they want you to provide them the whole walkthrough. But as an agency, coming from agency, because you don't have the full access to the client CMS, you can't go poking around. But I'll say every time we've worked with a site like WordPress, it's never been as easy as just changing the htaccess file. Sometimes you actually need to go and check everything on the page to find out what's that non-secure item that's being pulled onto the page. Usually it's like an image or a plugin that someone's forgotten about that has been installed on the site like 2,000 years ago, 3 managers ago, and that's usually the culprit.
Well, what did you go on, David?
So yes, it's the same like that as we working in agency, my experience. So it was basically the very hard to change the from their dev agency. They don't want to give us the access, so we need to go through a bit more comprehensive kind of the documentation process. Look, this is something wrong here. Take the screenshot, put into the spreadsheet or put into the Word file and share with them. And then there's something they're coming back to us. Yes, it has been fixed. And I feel like the most of the challenge is basically the dealing with the dev agency when you are working on the agency. But it's not. It is very straightforward in terms of the technology-wise, in terms of basically fixing process. But it is not the reality. It takes time, and also there are a lot of back and forth is going forward when it's coming to like a small things. And also they don't prioritize these things. Its impact on SEO. So my experience now, like for example, I'm dealing one of the pharmaceutical company, and small thing changing, it takes about few months. It's not happen. Also, we give them kind of a lot of screenshot, like explanation why we need it, even kind of the priority. Okay, you need to fix this one, then you will get this benefit. Also, last few months, it's not happening. So yeah, that is the reality, I would say.
Yeah, the pharma industry, a whole different thing because of the regulations in there. I'm sure you're finding out right now. Yes, I understand. Well, what about this then? I mean, have you guys then thrown two different suggestions at me then? Because we've taken, let's say you've got HT. If you're going to make a migration, should you do it once and do it properly, or should you do it in bit by bit by bit by bit? And let me explain what I mean by that. So let's say that you're going to change your domain name, and since you're going to change your domain name from you've managed to buy the domain without the hyphen in it, and so you want to change it to just that, but in the process, you're also going to change from dub to non-dub. You're going to go from HTTP to HTTPS only, and you'll potentially change server at the same time. Is that good, or is that a disaster area? And the reason I ask is because we started with the question of, with the suggestion that it's taking the people with you that's the most difficult takeaway, and surely that's going to be really hard if you're going to have to do 5 migrations really in 5 different phases. So I'm purposely making a difficult question for you. Who wants to go for it first? Would you go all at once, or just do it in bit by bit by bit?
It depends on how far back the site is. Because I have.
It's fine. It's fine. Every answer, SEO answer.
Yeah, I have. We working with a client that is on MDOT. Now they want to. I mean, it's 2020, but this is where we are. Do you understand? And now mobile first indexing's come. Everyone's panicking. It's going to have mobile only indexing now, not even mobile first. It's going to be here, by March, and everyone's panicking. So they want to do that. They want to upgrade the server. We've run out of time. We just have to do everything together. So that's why I say it depends. It depends on, like, if you're coming, if a site is like doing well visibly, everything, you just need to, I guess, they just rebranding, and so they want to make all those changes, then I'll say you can do it step by step. But if a site is in a hurry because there's an algorithm change coming on, then hey guys, we have to get a move on. It just depends, and then it depends on the risk the company is willing to take. I've seen a site being taken over, and now they have like 20 domains to migrate because it's an international site, and they're like, well, there's so much to lose, can we do 5 first? And I have actually seen, I think I saw a video by John Muller where he said, he will advise you to do 1, so you measure the impact. It depends on what risk the agency is prepared, the site owner is prepared to take.
It's not just the risk, though, is it? It's the I don't know. It's the marathon, not a sprint kind of thing. Because every single one of those, if you're going to try and take the people with you, you're going to need to tell people, right, we're going to be doing this next Friday, this next Friday. We've got to do this on Thursday because we need a day in case it all goes wrong. You guys are all going to have to press a button on your, whatever it may be. So it's that marathon thing versus the sprint. But I think mobile is a very good example, especially MDOT. It's a really good example of a lot of people in that position where they had a mobile version of the site, and presumably I assume you'd all recommend everybody that they should have one URL and a responsive site, and that's how it should be, and that's how it always should have been. But yeah, well, it's what are the main things with mobile? Changing that URL structure, or basically changing the subdomain to a URL structure. What are the problems? What are the problems that people are going to see? Deb, do you want to jump in?
So yes, so I would say basically I would definitely make a priority, and I will go through a kind of a phase by phase. So what are the top priorities? So what are the different like a subdomain or domains or inversion the site has, or how many sites do you need to migrate? And what are the main, the expectation from the stakeholders? So what they're expecting from the migration. So I would basically go through different stakeholders first and make the priorities of what needs to be done as a priority. Let's say they're running an e-commerce platform. So then I would say basically, yes, we need to basically, migrate the main like a product pages. Then we have to go through a shopping cart. Let's go through basically a top landing page, top performance, this coming through the pages. So I would go through and prefer like a phase by phase. I know we should be doing basically in a one go. So make sure we can get the maximum visibility and maximum benefits from the old site or the new domains what we are going to basically migrate. So I would prefer the phase by phase.
Okay. Chris, you a phase by phase guy or all at once?
If it was my money, I'm a phase by phase guy. And that's the take. I mean, I think the point about bringing everyone with you is so critical. You've got to take the temperature in the room when you're having that conversation. If people are being dragged to the table under duress because they don't want to touch it, the IT director's happy with what he's got. He likes his old Windows server. Thank you very much. But you have the opportunity to make the change, then you've got to do it, and you've got to make sure you get it right. But I think that phased iterative approach is so key. I think coming back to the MDOT example, MDOT's a pain anyway, but you're making the assumption that you're not your two versions of your site are comparable, that you have parity, that when you merge them, the merging will work. And that's a dangerous assumption. And it's, if you want to make a more reasoned kind of investigation down that route, you would iterate that. You wouldn't just do it in one go. But I think I would like to have the time, but you never do. In my experience, the stakeholders are always like, gun it, do it now.
I think with M dot, and I'm not probably as technical as you guys, so you can shoot me, but most M dots started, see, I'm an old guy, and we used to when somebody says, oh, I need a mobile version, we went to some dodgy software that created a mobile version of a site and created an M dot, so it was completely hosted on somebody else's servers. Anyway, this was a long time ago,
Not quite WAP,
but but the point remains, though, if you're going to go back from an M dot to a single URL, then before you can do any of that, you've got to make the main site, the main URL structure, to be responsive. And then theoretically, you're not actually moving anything. You're just throw-running all the old URLs or M dot URLs onto the new URLs, I would assume, or possibly, if you're really lucky, doing that at the DNS level. But 301ing the URLs or 301ing at the whole domain level is probably the last job, and that's the easiest job if you've got everything else right in that process. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, largely. I'd say it's if there's parity of content problems, I think if you've got two sites that have become somehow dislocated, that becomes fun. Because if the mobile site is has a different content proposition, merging them back in is pretty much just resolving them back to the main site. But do you need to bring any of this content across? Do you need to factor in any new internal linking? They're the trickier ones to answer. And I think the way that I've usually done it is side-by-side crawl, desktop versus mobile. We'll look at the key pages. What are the stats at a page-by-page level? How similar? If they're close enough, then that's fine. If you're noticing massive differences, then there may be a gremlin in the system that you've got to work out first.
And a common problem. Sorry, anyone want to jump in there? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Chris, because most of the time, if people are still on that, I'll say old technology, it's because they haven't bothered to optimize the desktop sites for mobile UX. So you have to there will be that UX issues where content will differ, and you need to resolve how you're going to display that first on desktop, and what content you're going to carry across, what you're leaving behind, and all of those issues first before you now start mapping out, your redirects and things.
So, and I guess if you've got an e-commerce site, don't try and change your URLs 2 weeks before Christmas. If you're that's not a good idea. Start in January when you're on your off season. Because Google's going to mess us up 2 weeks before Christmas anyway. They do every year. Okay, what about a much more complicated thing? Changing a CMS. Surely that's a much more complicated problem than changing from one URL structure to another. So it's even more complicated than changing your domain name, I would guess. So why on earth would businesses do that in the first place?
Not very good at seeing into the future is the problem, I think.
Yeah, when I got my first website, it was on front page 98. I'm sorry, I didn't have WordPress to play with, or JavaScript even. So some of these things are very, very old. So basically, you're saying that so CMSs. The problem is that CMSs develop, don't they? So at some point, the one that you chose doesn't stand to the test of time, really. So, but what are the major problems with that process? Changing the CMS. What's on your checklist? Sorry, it wasn't meant to be a test. Sorry.
I think we're all being polite, aren't we?
Oh no, I think you can swear about anything. That's all right. You can, what are the CMSs then? Let's do it the other way around. What are the CMSs you should run from, like Billy O right now?
It depends, doesn't it? It just depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to because I guess most CMSs have evolved over the years. They used to be the run from Shopify, but Shopify Plus has evolved, and they found a way to put robots text file. They've even found a way to make subfolders. I discovered that they announced that in June. So that's You used to have to create a subdomain. So that it just depends on what your needs are, what you're trying to do. So before Magento, people used to be like, no, Magento, no, or Kentico. But I have a client that's migrating to headless now because they have so many sites and you can just pull what you need because of speed. So I wouldn't say any CMS in particular to run from, although I have to say Drupal hasn't really
Yeah, this was
hasn't made leaps and bounds, but
yeah. Drupal was when I was first going. I'm going back. I don't know. You may have been born, Miracle, but yeah. But I remember the first time when we decided to move to a CMS, full stop. So I was back in the days of HTML, and our agency that I had then, we had an argument. I'll say discussion, but it was an argument at the time. I wanted to go WordPress, and my CTO, who knew a lot more about things, told me to go Drupal for our own site. And God, the learning curve on Drupal compared to WordPress was huge, really. And over the years, I think now that's what 60%, 58%, 60% of all websites are in WordPress. Is that right? I don't know. It's a big number. It is. I mean, I know that doesn't cover all your bases, and it's not good for everything, but it does. There's so many people using it that I know you've got to have a reason to go away from WordPress, I'd say now.
I think most of the time devs will say will security issues. So if you're a large enterprise, you're probably not going to choose WordPress because they always bang on about security issues, and I did
bring down the whole website because we put the blog on a subdirectory. So yes, I can see that is a point. But most of those security issues are the plugins that you put in, and RPC XML or something. I don't know if that's what it's called, but basically it's a sort of two-way talking with WordPress.org. And if you switch, you can tie down WordPress pretty quick, I think. If you go through a checklist. So.
Absolutely. I think the thing with CMS is now that a lot of them are so easy to port between that you can you don't have to be tied in. I think in my current career, the biggest red flags are always, not owning the rights to your code base, or you're getting something that is, tied to a particular vendor or agency. And don't get me wrong, some people do a good job in that space, but I've picked up so many sites that have ended badly on that. And you've had a website that's got 12 months into its life, and it's being replatformed just because of the relationship that's broken down, rather not because the platform's not right. And that's the most expensive way to find out your procurement process was weak ever. You can go between CMS. I mean, it's content migration piece at the end of the day, and it depends how complex your site is. But assuming that you host content and that's as complex as it is, then moving between CMSs shouldn't be a problem. It's when you have a CRM and an e-com and maybe a forum and all of the members area and all of the other stuff, that's when you kind of need to be working out what does your next 5 years look like when you're buying the next month's or the next year's worth.
And of course WordPress is open source, isn't it? So no problem there. So,
absolutely.
And I'll just agree with Chris, because I was going to say, I was like, maybe there's something more tricky that I haven't experienced, because I would say for me, CMS migrations are not that tricky. It's always gone smoothly for me. The only time I found it tricky is when the relationship's broken down, and I've seen so many bad things where you have to hire a developer by night to clone the site while the other developers are asleep. It's always when the relationship's broken down, or custom CMS is where just to even update the page title, you have to send a code, pay, and the site owner has no control whatsoever. And that's when you see CMS migrations go bad, just because the code is not in your control. Apart from that, they're usually pretty, straightforward.
So
I think changing CMS is technology-wise is not that complex. We can move over whether it is a complex or site or simply site. It's more about kind of the stakeholder mindset. For example, so we are basically we tried number of times with our clients to change the CMS, and they had a relationship with Cognizant, the TCS, Accenture, so they don't want to change the CMS. They have such kind of the long-term commitment, and the SLA is placed in such a way you cannot move around, even though we are impacting by the algorithm change or updating the content. However, what I have noticed, the since past like a few like a months, and I would say since last year, a lot of like a companies moving to the is a WordPress website. Is easy to the implement, easy to fix, and a lot of tutorials in the market, and the people are getting into like WordPress website. But also, if you think about like the security perspective, is really tricky. The number of sites has been hacked. The like in the internet, and it's very easy to like identify what are the main issue. Number of times I seen is more about like a plugin issue. So we are using a lot of free plugins, and that causing issue. And the number of setup in the back end of the WordPress site. So if you don't the tick or untick, it does easily people can come and hack the website. And it's like the some people has really the bad experience about WordPress. And if you talk about Shopify, I had a really bad experience with Shopify. I know it's a great platform, and a lot of people using, but we try to change like and customize few things in terms of like checkout process. We want to make checkout process much more simpler. For example, there is a the card drawer. We want to the customize that card drawer section, make it more like the optimize that version, so we can get customer very easily into our shopping cart. So I had a really the bad experience on there with number of clients. I would say basically the changing CMS is basically a big process and the stakeholder mindset of whether they want to change or not. So that is basically from my side.
Maybe there's a really good business opportunity for possibly someone in this room or someone listening. Then that maybe what we need is a WordPress plugin pen testing kite mark, something that the plugin makers can go to and say, here, try and check this for security and check it out and stuff, and then you've got a kite mark that says, yeah, this one is past all the things. As long as you don't put in a silly password or do this or do that, then you're going to be fairly safe. I don't think there's a business out there that does that. I think that would be a great thing to have, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course. Even like one of other things I would say, a lot of people is going to theme forest, the one of the marketplace. You can go and buy any theme, and that theme has a number of function and feature. People don't need it. The way it's been built, that theme, they build basically a multi-purpose theme, and you don't need some of the function feature, and that causing an issue even the site speed. It's the one of the basically site I set up. It takes about like a 10 to 15 like second to load the the site. They have a simple few pages. It's not like a complex or like a huge content or huge site, but it takes a lot of time. It depends how you're setting up. And also like if you use like a Divi theme, I try with the Divi theme and it works really fine. It's much more easier. You can customize. It depends even like what kind of the site it is.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, do you want to jump in there?
No, I just wanted to ask a question and say what does it take? How many meetings do you have? Because I find in my experience, we have more meetings about site CMS migrations. So if you're doing a CMS migration, you tend to have more meetings with stakeholders than if you're migrating a domain. And I just wanted to find out if that was the same for everyone, because they seem to think that the CMS migrations is this massive deal, but when you're changing a domain, I'm just just do the SEO redirects and everything should be fine. But it's just an interesting.
I don't change too many because I'm. What do you reckon? You guys find that? Do you find what miracles?
Yes, but I think it's mainly because the team that has to make a CMS migration move is a lot bigger, and I find in that process the fewer people that you can involve that actually need to obviously involve the key people, but only involve the people that actually need involvement. So if you can make it seem like a quick and simple process, or make it a quick and simple process and then tell them when you're done. I think the problem with a CMS migration is you tend to have about 10 more people that want to be in on those meetings, and that has a habit of spinning it out. I mean, I think in some senses it impacts more people. But if the domain name shift goes wrong, then obviously, that'll kind of devastate them all eventually. It just takes longer to trickle down to some of them, I think.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, that the domain change does sound like it's just a DNS thing, but I mean, for me, I'm much more scared of the concept of a CMS change because from the non-techie side of things, I suppose, relatively speaking, in that for me, a CMS change is not just about the CMS change. It's about the relearning of a new CMS. Trying to learn Drupal instead of WordPress, or or Magento instead of Shopify, or whatever it may be. There's a whole new learning process in there that perhaps as techies we don't really pay much attention to, but as users, just knowing how to do a refund is probably a little learning curve for everybody that's trying to use the system. So there is that, I think. So
Yeah. I would say basically it's my experience that most of the people is really basically scared about changing the CMS. They feel it's like it is really a big task, it's a big job, and it can break my website, and I don't know what will happen to my website after the migrating the CMS. And also it takes like a lot of times to convince them to change the CMS. I try, especially one of our clients, like this CMS was basically very older version of one of the Microsoft the .NET platform. Changing the whole CMS, it takes about one stakeholder to another story. It took about, still is keep going on, but still it didn't happen. It's 1 year. So one of our is a client. So I would say is really scary for our stakeholder. They want to change it. But technology-wise, I think yes, there are a lot of new technology coming into the market. There are a lot of flexibility into the CMS. Every CMS provider is making much more simpler version, making a lot of robust system that is more the digital friendly, SEO friendly. And we need to just convince them, look, guys, this is the new things is coming on. You can do a lot of automated things from your backend. So that is the way basically we keep trying to change CMS. I think that is basically I would say.
Okay. I'm glad you guys think CMS changes are easy, because I think they're just a nightmare. Okay, let's go for another nightmare then. And I think it's the last one we're probably going to have time for, because we're already 40 minutes in. What about changing your web server? I mean, is that a whole different thing for SEO, or is that important for SEO to get involved with? Because as the world moves to into recession, depression, whatever, 2021, there's going to be a fair few people going bust, and if it happens to be your web hosting company, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So maybe our disaster recovery plans should be able to cope with that. But does moving servers have to affect SEO?
Well, no, is the short answer. I mean, broadly speaking, a server migration should be better, because it gives you the opportunity to, while we're at it, we can finally upgrade all of the technology. You can have the most up-to-date version of PHP, or you can do whatever it is down that road. Usually, though, I find out about the server migration when I start finding that redirects we implemented a year ago now aren't in place anymore. Or I had one, I was using a market visibility tool piece of software, and I was tracking the old domain, and all of a sudden I noticed the old domain starts ranking again. I'm like, there's only one reason why that would happen, and the hosting company deleted the old HD access file and put in a box fresh one instead, and we only noticed when the old domain started ranking again 2 weeks later. And it's that's usually when we hear about them.
So that sounds like it is a depends, really. Maybe the server does.
I didn't say it depends.
No, I know you didn't. No, you're very good at not saying it depends, but saying in theory it doesn't. It shouldn't make a difference. I think there's clearly some checklists for SEOs that it would be helpful if the developer knew what was, or whoever's changing it, the systems administrator knew what the pitfalls were for SEO. Along that way as well. Obviously, the speed of the server. One of my pet hates is shared hosting. As giving a whole load of question marks for SEOs when you're on shared hosting and you've got a site with, especially if you're going to move from a dedicated host to a shared host. I don't know why you do that. Maybe you're contracting. Maybe you're contracting because of the recession. So it's possible, I suppose.
Or the FD decides that they don't want to pay for the dedicated hosting anymore, so you're moving to a shared box.
Yeah, because obviously that's going to make you less money. Yeah,
more
money. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Anyone else want to jump in or disagree with Chris on the changing your server, migrating your server?
So I would say no. I just agree with the Chris. I think there's no the huge impact on the SEO the perspective. So I would say yes, there are a lot of share hosting. a lot of dedicated VFS, VPS, the hosting. So people are basically using. Also, if you can look into last few years, AWS coming into the market, they're providing really, the good VPS server. A lot of people using. Azure is another great example. They're a bit expensive, but I would say AWS taking, the market. As their basically server is much more the flexible and robust. You can manage everything from AWS control panel. But I don't see any huge impact on the SEO side. I think if you have a share hosting, as you said, it's a bit tricky. Maybe sometimes it's side speed issue. Apart from that, I don't see any other huge impact on from a hosting point of view.
Okay. And you're on with that? You agree with that, Miracle?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I have seen though when you have a shared hosting where something happens on that IP, maybe it's been hacked or something, and another site on that place been hacked, and then it affects your site and your site gets taken down. So I have seen that happen to a client once. Apart from that, we usually hear about it after it's happened, or when we see that the old site is getting crawled or indexed and they forgot to migrate the old redirects that were on the HT access file. That's the only impact that it's had on SEO that I know.
But all of those are if you've changed the URL structure, but you won't have done if you've moved the actual server. You don't want to change the URL structure at all.
No,
so that shouldn't be changing. So it's only when that does happen.
Well, even just the historic list of redirects, if they where it's stored statically.
I see your point. They completely forget to take that bit over. All the work you've just done for the last 5 years. They forget that.
It's like leaving the supermarket with your shopping, but your wallet's still on the checkout, isn't it? It's kind of that sort of analogy.
Or sometimes they do it and then something happens and they roll it back to a previous version of the site with the old site map. So I've seen that happen before, and it's the old site map, and then the old site just starts getting crawled, and you're like, what's happening? And then you find out, you always find out these things like posts after they've happened.
I think I'll add one more point here about that hosting change. What I find out, let's say you're changing from one hosting to the another hosting. So some internal settings is impact on the htaccess file. Let's say you have there is a .NET platform. So now you have a different the server setting managing to the htaccess file, a different file formation. So this is where it become a bit tricky. Make sure your file formation setup correct to the new server. Make sure your a page and all the the internal links the work correctly. So that is one of the points. Might be the worth looking into that as well.
Yeah. Certainly, different servers configured differently can have quite an impact on the site speed as well. So, which is an SEO factor. So there we go. Guys, we're at the end of our time again. These things tend to go pretty quick, and today's no exception. So, guys, just before you say where we can get hold of you from, David, what's happening next time on the next show? Where is it? When is it? How do we find it?
Sure. Next time is the 21st of December. That is, as usual, at 4 p.m. GMT, and we'll be broadcasting live as usual on YouTube, on Facebook, and of course Twitter. Perhaps we'll be experimenting with something else, but I'm sure certainly Facebook and YouTube. And of course, if you're listening to this, add your comments on board as well, whatever platform you happen to be listening on. We haven't had a whole lot of interaction. We had a couple of likes. Jason Barnard from CaliCube, thank you very much for interacting on YouTube a little bit there as well. Also thanks to Kim Toffrey for liking the show on Facebook as well. So keep the conversation going if you're listening to the replay as well. But in terms of topic for next time, well, it's all about 2021. I can't even say that. I'm not even thinking of the year yet. How to hit the SEO ground running in 2021. 4 p.m. GMT, Monday the 21st of December. Stay tuned to the email updates from inlinks.net to get your alert to see exactly where we're going to be broadcasting live.
Or check out thepanelshow.com. And guys, so thank you very much. Can I just leave it by saying, how do people get in contact with you if they've got any questions, follow-ups, want you to do their migrations? Where do they go? I'll go in reverse order. Deb, where do you want to go? How do they find you?
So they can find me Twitter. They can find me via LinkedIn. So I'm all the times on there. So anytime. So if they need anything, I'm here to support as much as I can. So yes.
So what's your Twitter handle?
So SEO-Debdut. So that is my Twitter.
DEBDUT.
Yes.
Miracle?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Mira_Inam, or LinkedIn. Just set my name on LinkedIn. Yeah, Miracle Namity Archibong. It's very long.
It's the coolest name though. It's the coolest name, I have to say. And Chris, not such a cruel name, but there we go.
No, you can find me on Twitter, Chris Green 87, or footprintdigital.co.uk, or LinkedIn. But I can't remember what my name is on there. I would say just search for my name, but there are hundreds of Chris Greens. So good luck finding me.
All the change. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for everyone watching now and on the replays, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.